Still with me, Deputy Public Defender for Los Angeles County, Philip Dube. And we're waiting for another guest. I don't think we have her right now. But Philip, let me ask you about this case. You know, this case is fascinating in so many ways. Now, we've talked a little bit out and focused on in this segment this idea that it perhaps could have been avoided by the police officers in Moab treating it a little differently when they came upon the two of them. I think one of the issues was that perhaps they didn't have all the information that they needed. But either way, looking at that situation, and I'm sure you've seen the tape, what's your take on how that was handled and whether something more could have and should have been done?
Michael, at the end of the day, the problem with what happened in Utah was Utah law. The Utah domestic violence statute necessarily includes assault within its ambit. And in order to have probable cause to make an arrest for a domestic related assault, there has to be an attempt to do bodily harm, as opposed to just an unlawful use of force. You have to actually intend to do bodily harm. And if you noticed, when the officer was questioning Gabby roadside there during that detention, he specifically asked her. It's as if he had a script tailored to their DV statute out there. You know, do you think he was trying to hurt you? Do you think he was trying to cause you injury? Do you think he was trying to cause some kind of harm? And I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember verbatim. But the bottom line is he has this probable cause script that he needs to follow. Otherwise, if he hauls somebody in, it's an illegal arrest under Utah law. Now, I can tell you there's been great strides in reform in domestic violence law across this country. And of course, it's in response to the O.J. Simpson trial that we had here in the 90s out in Los Angeles. There were so many calls going unheeded by law enforcement from young women who were getting beaten up by their boyfriends and by their spouses. So they basically made a hard, fast rule, if you will, allowing the cops to make an arrest without a warrant, even if they don't actually observe the underlying DV itself, and it can be based on the statements of the victim herself or himself. But here, there was no intent to inflict bodily injury, and that's why he let them both go.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you. The law was definitely one of the issues here. You know, right now, I want to bring in another guest in this segment. Private investigator Erica Morse joins us now from Chicago. Erica, are you there? I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
I am. Thanks, Michael, for having me. Sorry, technical difficulties.
Yeah, no problem. But you're on the phone, and we got you, so that's great. And you're someone who's familiar with, now, the big issue here, of course, is we're trying to track down this guy. The authorities are trying to find him. You're someone who specializes in that, has some thoughts on that. And first and foremost, you know, there's a couple of things I want to ask you. They've indicted him on something called, unauthorized use of devices. Really what it boils down to, I think he used a debit card. We don't even know if that debit card belonged to the victim or the supposed victim in this case, Gabby Petito, but we know it wasn't his. What does that tell you about what he's doing, where he is, what his mindset is? Tells me that maybe he's struggling for money.
Absolutely. And I mentioned this last night. I think that, when an incident like this occurs, someone like this occurs, somebody panics in this situation. And we don't know what happened between them in that moment. We are all presuming that he is the person responsible for taking Gabby's life. But at no point yet has that been established by law enforcement or by anyone in a prosecutorial setting. So we have a lot of presumptions here. But what I can say is it sounds like he was panicked. He clearly used a debit/credit card belonging to someone, because in the documents it does not reference one account number. It references two different account numbers. I think that that's right on point about being low on money. I think it was a need to get out, a need to get away from that situation, and both as quickly as possible. We know that he had, if we are to believe that TikTok user, we know he had access to cash at some point, because he reportedly offered a TikTok user $200 for a short ride.
Yeah, so, you start putting all that together, it creates an interesting scenario. Now, folks on social media have been saying that Brian Laundrie's parents should be held responsible as well. For instance, one of our viewers, Linda Creek, wrote that she wrote on Facebook saying, why haven't the parents been arrested? Philip Dube, I'll go to you on this. You know, there's some sense that they might have been misleading authorities. There's some sense that they know more than they're giving away. What might be the liability of these parents in this case if it's found that they've done something wrong?
Well, up to this point, I haven't seen any wrongdoing on their part. If anything, they're only trying to protect their son's legal interests by getting him an attorney. Now, where they could face criminal liability is if they lie to the police or the FBI about anything during the course of that investigation. The parents have the right to remain silent, just as Brian Laundrie does. But if they choose to be interviewed, if they choose to answer questions, they better be truthful and not misleading. I don't believe they can get him as an accessory after the fact because they're not doing anything to harbor a fugitive. They're not, concealing any of the instrumentalities that may have allegedly been used in her demise. It's not as if they're funneling him money as a so-called fugitive on the lam. I just don't see it. They just happen to be the parents of a kid who's in trouble. And not every parent who doesn't want to cooperate with the police is necessarily an accomplice.
Yeah, no question about it. I think folks online are angry at them because they're really not saying much at all, Erica. They're not offering condolences. They're not saying anything at all, really keeping quiet, which in the end may be the right thing to do, but certainly it's, again, getting the ire from folks online. Is there anything we can glean? Again, we're all, focused, or the police are focused on catching this guy, Brian Laundrie. Is there anything from the fact that they're being quiet and not saying anything, some of their actions that can help in the search for their son?
It is hard to accept at this point that they are concerned for his well-being because we haven't seen the typical responses from parents who report their children missing of any age, whether it be a child or an adult. We know from other cases that parents of adults go out all the time and talk to the press. I think what has the court of public opinion, so to speak, so angry is the lack of communication, period. The lack of cooperation, the fact that the only time they picked up the phone and did communicate with the police was when Brian reportedly disappeared, and then they clammed up again. So in the court of public opinion, yes, they appear guilty of sin, and I've gone up against parents of suspects, and sometimes our emotions just tend to get in the way, and we have to look at what can be proven in a court of law and what has evidence behind it. We can't glean anything right now from them because they're being silent.
Yeah, really. And the same actually applies to Brian Laundrie as well. We can't glean anything right now. I think at the end of the day, when that autopsy result comes in, I think that's going to maybe change a few things. All right, Erica Morse, I want to thank you so much for joining me. We truly appreciate it. Philip Dube, you're going to be standing by as we take this break. Now,